From coast to cactus to constellation, KCET, infinitely more.
Major funding for Life and Times was provided by the James Irvine Foundation, which is dedicated to the development of an informed California citizenry, with additional support from GTE, Building Better Communities Through Communication.
I wish somebody would have tapped me on the shoulder and says, Leo, these are the good old days.
People were very, very careful about their manners then.
This was a tremendously romantic time.
Would you like me to blow it?
People are always saying those were the good old days. Did you ever wonder if they really were? And if they were so wonderful, why did they disappear? Let me ask you a couple of questions. You ever wonder what the Hollywood sign said before it said Hollywood? And were those wonderful old red cars blue or green before they were red? How long has it been since you had lunch at Clifton's Pacific Seas or a Cobb salad at the Derby? Tell you what, I'll put 5 gallons of Flying A in the Studebaker. You get a couple of jelly donuts from the helmsman. We'll stop by Curry's for a couple of mile-high cones, and we'll take in the Hollywood Stars at Gilmore Field. If they're not playing tonight, we'll go on to Pacific Ocean Park, and we'll meet some wonderful people who remember all of these things that aren't here anymore. Now you see it, now you don't. And they call that history. Happens all the time, only maybe oftener in Los Angeles. My name is Ralph Story, and on January 7th, 1948, I parked my Studebaker right there, and I walked into this building to begin 40 years of talking, first on radio and then on television. My first job was to sign on KNX at 6 o'clock in the morning. I had to learn to say, de KNX, muy buenos días para la ciudad de Los Angeles. Well, KNX is still transmitting, and I see Mark C. Bloom is still wheeling and dealing across the street, and the Palladium is still dancing next door. And surprise, I'm still talking. I remember I bought an old Spanish fixer-upper house up Beechwood Drive under the Hollywood sign, only it didn't say Hollywood then. It said Hollywoodland. The H had fallen down, and it was actually just a real estate tract. Another nice old Los Angeles custom. Just about everything else I remember about Los Angeles isn't here anymore. So, where to begin? Well, in the beginning, there was the car. Not your car or my car, everybody's car, the big red car. It's the way we got to all of the places that aren't here anymore. And it's the sure winner of our nostalgia trophy. Everywhere on the slogan, live in the transit, and we're still reminiscing about those good old days.
I was working in downtown Los Angeles, and my husband was working on the red cars. He would always tip his hat and say, well, that was nice to see you ride again today. So this went on for several weeks, and one day he wrote a little note to me on one of the little white tickets, and he said, do you think it would be okay for me to ask you for a date? Well, this went on for a couple of weeks, and I never answered. Then he said, you didn't answer my note. So finally I said, well, perhaps.
Gonna take a sentimental journey, gonna set my heart at ease.
Then we dated in April to August, and we were married for 49 years.
Don't look for villains like the car companies or the bus companies or the tire companies. You and I killed the big red cars. We took the trolley to the end of the line. We bought the lot and built the house, and then we betrayed our true love. We bought a car. We bought 100,000 cars. And in the 50s and 60s, Pacific Electric choked to death on them. A tragic affair because we broke the first rule of true love. We didn't go home with the one who brought us. And now I wonder if you remember the tropical island we used to have right here on Olive Street in the middle of Los Angeles. It was only a cafeteria, but my, what a cafeteria. Clifford Clinton and his family transplanted everything from Hawaii. Waterfalls, palm trees, coconuts, pineapples, hula skirts, ukuleles, the whole luau. But what they served was meatloaf and coleslaw, and they called this Pacific Seas. However, what made Clifton's really special was their pricing policy. As a residual of the Depression years and their Christian faith, Clifton's never turned away anyone who couldn't pay for dinner. Think of that.
And everybody said to him, "You're going to go bankrupt doing this," but he didn't. Shortly after I graduated from UCLA, which was in 1937, another lady, a friend of mine, and I started a little gift shop right inside the door of the Pacific Seas cafeteria. We not only sold mementos from the islands, but we also made leis from fresh flowers. The inside was just beautiful. They had neon palms coming up in several parts of the dining room. Facing the front of the cafeteria was a platform where they had singing waiters. And every so often, one of the waiters, whose turn it was, would go up and sing with a microphone for the whole dining room to hear.
And Esther should know she's worked for Clifton's for 51 years. She still writes their monthly newsletter called Food for Thought, and on her 40th anniversary, the owner, Don Clinton, gave her this plaque.
And what thrilled me most was that he put on here this original brass plaque, which was fastened to the outer door of Clifton's Pacific Seas, because Clifton's Pacific Seas is no longer there. And this is a little verse I wrote about that. Step from the street with its dust and cries into an island paradise. Amid these tropic trees and flowers, find rest and peace and happy hours, where rainbow waters cool the air, where girls with blossoms in their hair offer you tempting foods to eat, where the atmosphere is gay and sweet with friendliness, where music sings to lift your spirit on its wings. From here you'll seek the streets again, refreshed to meet your fellow men.
Well, Clifton's is still serving meatloaf at a number of locations in Los Angeles, but it's their Pacific Seas that people still talk about.
It was a chance to feel that you had traveled elsewhere into a wonderful realm and you were right in your own city.
Weird bird, the ostrich. So weird, people used to drive out to the ostrich farms like Costin's in Pasadena just to take pictures, or maybe to take a ride. The product, of course, was feathers for women's hats and clothes. Ah, but fashions change. During the Depression, the feathers and the birds and the farms all disappeared. But wait, they're coming back. Out in the agricultural areas, the ostrich farms are bigger than ever now, only this time it's not the feathers or the leather, it's the meat. Rich, red, beef-like meat, low in cholesterol, high in price, and they say it'll be the meat of the 90s. Ah, yes, times do change. It's no wonder those birds stick their heads in the sand. And don't look now, but I think one is trying to get away. Now, here's something that hasn't been here for a long time. It's a different kind of railway, the vertical kind. When inventor and Professor Thaddeus S.C. Lowe retired to Pasadena, he got a crazy idea. He built a little mile-long electric trolley line from here to there. Well, actually from down here to up there. Then he built an observatory, a tavern, and a hotel at the top, and he had a winner on his hands. They even renamed that little mountain, and it's known as Mount Lowe to this day. He said he did it just for the point of view, but when the roads and the cars could also snake up the mountain even higher, the thrill was gone. The hotel burned in the 30s, and now it's just one of those things that lives on in our memories, but if you ask me, the old professor really had a point of view. Are you having a good time? You know, back then, having a good time was called amusement, and we had amusement parks. Venice was an amusement park. You could ride the trolley along the boardwalk, take a gondola ride in the quaint Venice canals, and come clean now, anybody here remember taking a bath in the local bathhouse? More than just an amusement, though, was the awesome, thrilling, legendary roller coaster in Long Beach called the Pike. And a different kind of thrill was having your picture taken with the king of the jungle at Gay's Lion Farm in El Monte. Only cost $1. And down by the sea, we had a great big fish farm. Everybody fondly remembers Marineland. Okay, do you remember what used to be right here where the Beverly Center is now? It was called Beverly Park. In the world of amusement parks, Beverly Park would surely be voted least likely to succeed, but it succeeded anyway for reasons that are hazy. It was really just a patch of green at the corner of Beverly and La Cienega. Few ponies going round and round, little merry-go-round barely going around, and a hot dog stand. Did I miss something? But it ran all the time, and it ran for a long time. And they say all the divorced Beverly Hills fathers could take their kids there and unload a little guilt.
What I remember more than anything else was they had a pony ride, and it was a track. So my sister and I used to race around the track. But when you get off your ponies, in the middle of the track, they had swans and geese who would just virtually attack you. So you'll see lots of geese running up and biting kids on the butt, and that's what Beverly Park was like. I mean, it was a thrill park.
When my son was born, I would take him over there for his birthday parties. They had wonderful birthday parties over there. All the rides, and of course you bring all of his friends over, and you bought a string of tickets. You give all the kids tickets, they go on the rides. And it was a delightful park. It wasn't so many years ago that they tore it down, and why get rid of something like this? Now there's really no place for a child to go for his birthday.
This was all great for kiddie rides, but if you wanted the big-time thrills, you had to head to the beach.
By the sea, by the sea, by the beautiful sea, you and I, oh how happy we'll be. When each wave comes a-rolling in, we will duck or swim.
Once upon a time, everybody in Los Angeles wanted to go to the beach, and they did. So big wooden piers were built out into the Pacific, and little fun zones developed at the base of each one.
I love to be beside your side, beside the sea, beside the seaside.
Probably the most successful was Ocean Park, between the Venice Pier and the Santa Monica Pier.
Beautiful sea, you and I, you and I.
Pacific Ocean Park began to be terribly popular about the late turn of the century, about, the 1918, 1970. It was built before then, but that's when it was hit its heyday.
By the sea, by the beautiful sea, you and I, oh how happy we'll be. When each wave comes a-rolling in, we will duck or swim, and we'll float and fool around the water, over and under, and then up for air.
It has theaters, it had roller skate rinks, it had dance halls, it had restaurants, it had rides and slides, and something for everybody.
Seaside, by the beautiful sea.
But then in 1958, a tidal wave of money rolled in, and it became Pacific Ocean Park. 28 acres of nautical nonsense which really rivaled Disneyland. And the all-day admission, just 90 cents.
They took the old Highboy roller coaster and renamed it the Sea Serpent. They took the old Stratoliner, which was this huge tower with rockets swirling around, and renamed it Mr. Dolphin. They rebuilt its entire end of the pier and turned it into a banana boat train ride where you went out into the jungle and then circled a volcano that was erupting and then crossed rickety trestles across the tracks overlooking the ocean.
They had a very scary ride that were like these little bubbles that actually went out over the ocean. I remember probably in 1964, 65, one of them fell into the ocean with a couple of people in it. And every time I'd ever ride on it, I'd go, is it going to be me next?
I call it the centrifuge. I guess they call it the whirlpool. They got them in that. It looks like a barrel with a bottom in it. And they started spinning, and pretty soon you're glued to the back. But my husband didn't realize that the floor dropped away also. And our kids, they did get even with him because he about died on that one.
Another outstanding thrill at Pacific Ocean Park is when you ride over the Pacific Ocean in a bubble.
They called it POP for short, but not for long. 9 years after it opened, business fell off and the whole fantastic, fabulous foolishness just plain disappeared. But we can still hear the squeals of the sea serpent and feel the salt spray of Mr. Dolphin and Mrs. Squid, and we'll be back with more things that aren't here anymore. Just making a pun when I say that Los Angeles has had its ups and downs, literally and figuratively. But But probably the most successful and famous is this little trolley car behind me. Its name is Olivet, and it has an identical twin named Sinai. Those are biblical names chosen by the church-going ladies who lived up on Bunker Hill. And by now, of course, you know I'm talking about the incredible Angel's Flight. Just 100 yards of railroad, but it ran for over 60 years, traveled over 1 million miles, made over $1 million, and made over 1 million friends, every one of whom remembers it well.
You are my lucky star. Oh, I saw you from afar.
We've had all kinds of rides in the history of Los Angeles, but the shortest one is the most famous one. So let's climb aboard for the ride up to Bunker Hill.
I was starstruck, you're all my lucky charms. I'm lucky in your arms. You've opened heaven's portal here on earth for this poor mortal. You are my lucky star.
That was fun. My mother and father took me there when I was still a child. Rode up on it. It was quite a thrill. So when my little daughter was about 3 or 4, we took her on Angel's Flight. And she loved it too, and that was shortly before they stopped running it.
Well, as a young kid, it was exciting to be going up, and you felt like flying. You're going up the perpendicular, and then look back and go with the city.
Right here in downtown Los Angeles, at the corner of Hill and 3rd Street, is the original location of Angel's Flight. Throughout its history, Angel's Flight inspired many Angelinos. Local artist Ben Abril remembers Angel's Flight like this.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell. Zing, zing, zing went my heartstrings. For the moment I saw him, I fell.
And in this early silent movie, the words Angel's Flight are a source of great confusion for two young lovers. After 68 years of lifting our spirits, Angel's Flight was dismantled in 1969 to make way for new development. Instantly, it became one of our most beloved things that aren't here anymore. But wait, plans are to reunite us with our old love. Groundbreaking for the return of Angel's Flight, just 1 block south of its original location, is planned for 1995. And the moral of this story is, if we remember hard enough, we can bring things back. I'm happy to report that love and romance are two things that have not disappeared from Los Angeles, but a funny old romantic symbol is gone. It was just an elevator, but it ran to the 3rd floor of the Los Angeles courthouse, and that's where the Marriage License Bureau was. It was known as the honeymoon elevator, maybe because some of the honeymoons began before it reached the 3rd floor. But don't snicker. Some of those marriages lasted longer than the elevator and longer than the courthouse. Mean streets are not something new for Los Angeles. Right after the Civil War, all the desperados drifted to our southwest corner, and this was the most dangerous town in the West, and there was no 911. So, this sign was posted on Main Street in 1865. It's gone, but I mention it because there seems to be a strong feeling we should find the sign and put it up again. Was Los Angeles invented for the automobile, or was the automobile invented for Los Angeles? And was it a marriage made in heaven or in hell? We'll see. But we had the wide open spaces, the year-round sunshine, no snow, seldom mud, lots of nearby fuel, and the restless urge to see and do. So away we went in our merry motor cars to make the first real driving city. Everything we see and do and say and are begins and ends with our cars. We were going to reminisce about some of the wonderful old drive-ins which aren't here anymore, but historian Alan Hess says they are more than nostalgia. They are culture.
Over the decades, through trial and error, through experiment, Los Angeles got to know how to design for the car. Buildings would be shaped for the automobile. The drive-in restaurants, particularly, which came along in Los Angeles in the late 1920s, really had their heyday in the 1930s. These were service stations on the roadsides for people who were living in their automobiles.
The drive-in menu was burgers, fries, and shake, but the delivery system was a beautiful, sexy Los Angeles invention, the car hop. Car hops aren't here anymore, but all of us guys miss them. Don't be offended if I say Los Angeles has the best and the worst architecture in the world, and a lot of funny buildings in between. We like edible architecture, hot dog stands that look like hot dogs. But if we miss all of those funny old buildings, maybe somebody ate them. I don't need to tell you that Los Angeles is not a real city. It's just a whole bunch of neighborhoods sharing the same name. One of our neighborhoods was called Central Avenue. And I know the avenue is still there, but what's central is missing. People stayed up late, but they also got up early because their community was the entertainment center of town. Certainly thriving, if not prosperous. Everybody knew everybody else.
That was the place to go to see your friends. That you walked up and down Central to see your friends and to see what other people were doing, and you wanted to be with them, and you wanted to celebrate with them, and there they were.
It was like the people from the Avenue had their own world going. It was wonderful. Nobody seemed to mention it much outside of the area. And now it was probably better than we all knew.
Down in the middle of the block was the Club Alabama. Had Johnny Otis's big band in there with a stage show, chorus girls and everything. T-Bone Walker, blues singer, as the star. Across the street was The Last Word. I think you got the pictures of those, with jam sessions going on. All the jam sessions at that time were bebop-oriented. And what made bebop so important, they would have after-hours jam sessions. When you leave the Downbeat or the Alabama, one of them clubs there, you could go down to Jack's Basket Room on 33rd and Central, where you'd have Dexter Gordon, Miles Davis, Wardell Gray, all these people that would be down there. Everybody would be jamming.
Central was the place that we went to take care of business. We could shop, we could get hardware, newspapers were put out on Central. Central was almost like the main street in a small village. You could do anything there. During the time when Joe Louis was in his heyday, when he would have a fight, Central was quiet as you couldn't find anybody. Everybody is in their house listening to the fight.
Right and left to the head, a left to the jaw, a right to the head, and Donovan is watching carefully. Lewis measures him, right to the body, a left hook to the jaw, and Schmeling is down.
And whenever he would win, Central came alive. People would rush, walk, drive, get to Central to talk about, to celebrate, and drive up and down Central, blowing horns and yelling at each other. Oh, he won, and oh, wow. That was a big deal.
So there you have it. Some things on Central Avenue are gone, but the music and the memories live on. It may come as a shock in this age of supermarkets and supermalls, but the groceries used to come to us. The milkman and the iceman and the vegetable man and the meat man all came to the door, and the grocery man delivered the rest. The good humor man may still be around, but just about the last to go was everybody's favorite, the guy who blew the whistle, the helmsman.
This is a whistle that comes off of the Helms Bakery. Would you like me to blow it? Can you hear it?
Paul Helms started Helms Bakeries in 1930, and he got a contract to supply the Olympic training tables, then took on the Olympic job of baking for all of Los Angeles. Pretty soon, 300 trucks fanned out over the city every day. Thousands of kids chased after the helmsman for their share of sugared donuts, and Karen Bundy was one of them, and she's still a fan today.
The Helms coach would come about the same time every day with all the fresh baked goods you could possibly want, whether it was jelly donuts or cream puffs or chocolate chip cookies or Olympic bread or wheat bread or donuts of any shape and variety.
And you would just put up a card in your window, a Helms card, that would state that you wanted bread or pastry or for him to stop. And he would blow his whistle, and then you would go out and purchase whatever pastries or whatever you wanted.
You got a lot of service in those days. If you didn't have a car, it didn't make any difference because people brought things to you. That was their business.
This particular coach, owned by Hillcrest Motors, is a 1948 Helms Square coach. Mr. Helms said, don't call them trucks because garbage comes in trucks. So they are Helms coaches. And he started with 11 coaches, and at the height of the business, there were over 500 coaches on the road any given day, delivering to more than 3.5 million households.
Most people don't realize, but I was the first non-white ever to win a national championship in diving, and the first American-born Asian to win a gold medal for my country, the United States. But while we were there in London, Helms Bakery used to fly in the Helms bread every day for our consumption. And I remember all the Europeans, the Asians said, that bread, it's like cake, it is so white. How can they make bread so white? So we ate like kings. The French brought in their own wine, but we brought in Helms Bakery.
In 1969, a loaf of Helms bread sailed up in the Apollo 11 space capsule to become the first bread on the moon. But a sad postscript, 5 months later they turned off the ovens because those earthbound little delivery coaches were just too expensive.
It was a wonderful time, and Helms Bakeries, I think, elicits a very warm, personal feeling about the essence of Los Angeles at that time.
Even so, how much something costs is not a good measure of how long it's going to last. Another missing Los Angeles landmark was very proud of its high prices, and its high quality, and its high service. Of course, I'm talking about Bullock's Wilshire.
You walk in to buy a dress or something, and a very elegant, dignified saleswoman would come out to greet you, and you might see one or two things hanging on a model, but you told the lady what you wanted and what you were looking for, and you sat down on a couch, a beautiful beige affair with a coffee table in front, and the sales lady went out to find what you wanted. She would go out and bring 2 or 3 things for your approval. A model would be sent out to show you how it looked when it was worn on. And so that's the way you bought your clothes.
Bullock's Wilshire was the most gracious. You didn't even park your own car. You drove your car in and it was parked by a valet. And you got out to look on the ceiling and see a magnificent mural. And you would go in and you would do all your shopping. And when you were done, you would go out and your packages would be loaded in the car and you would drive away. The store was magnificent. And it is still magnificent. It was built in 1929, and it has a very unique history. It was the second store in the Bullock's chain. The man who conceived the store was P.G. Winnett, the vice president of Bullock's, and he went to the Paris Exposition of 1925. And the style that grew out of that exposition was Art Deco. And he saw all these Art Deco designs, and he decided, that's what I want for the new store. So the exterior was this magnificent 10 stories of copper and terracotta in this Art Deco style. And the interior was unlike any department store in Los Angeles.
It's where anybody who was anybody could buy anything, as everybody remembers.
One day, my mother and I were having lunch. The world stood still. What's happening? Our eyes were directed to the entrance, and there stood Marlene Dietrich. She was just at the height of her publicity career and good looks. She was wearing a man's black gabardine double-breasted suit, unbuttoned. a white silk shirt, unbuttoned about except here. Remember these the days the ladies did not go out without gloves, or proper clothes. And there she stood in all her glory in this entrance. She had on a pair of high-heeled satin opera slippers. No hat, no gloves, nothing. She just stood there like a goddess. Everybody just, the world just stopped. Unheard of. Women did not wear pants. Things like slacks were never seen. Everybody began to buzz, and it was like a herd of locusts, you know. They were just, you know, the chatter just didn't stop. I think that whole town was thrust into a state. Anyway, getting back to both, ladies went to lunch there.
The tea room was kind of blue blood American cuisine. You would go and have coconut cream pie or a Bombay salad with crab and shrimp. And their employee handbook said they had to use a certain vocabulary. They had to say we and not I. And they had to say approve and not okay. And they never said customer. They always said patron.
Bullock's Wilshire opened 1 month before the stock market crashed in 1929 as old money began moving west from downtown along Wilshire Boulevard. And they shopped for more than 60 years. Bullock's Wilshire closed its doors in 1992. But the real reason it isn't here anymore is because the old movie stars all died, and the old money kept right on moving west. So let's go west with it. We'll meet you sports fans for a hot time at Gilmore Field when things that aren't here anymore continues. Now it's the 50s, and here we are at Gilmore Stadium, where we can find, well, almost anything. This wonderful old adobe is the last memento we have to a big, tall, husky tycoon named Earl Gilmore. Gilmore owned 58 acres between 3rd and Beverly and Fairfax, and underneath those 58 acres was a big puddle of oil, and he used that oil to really make his mark on the city of Los Angeles. Now, there really ought to be a bigger monument to this than the guy who was behind Gilmore Field, Gilmore Stadium, Gilmore Bank, Gilmore Drive-In, Gilmore Gasoline, the Pan Pacific Auditorium, to say nothing of the Farmers Market, which is still very much here. Gilmore Stadium was not a perfect little football stadium. It was primitive and not that successful, but around the edge of the field ran an oval racetrack, and that's where Earl Gilmore struck oil again.
These midgets had just started then, and it was the exact copy of the Indianapolis engine, only it was half the size. Boy, that was the greatest thing that ever hit racing. But anyway, the first races I was in, I enjoyed driving so much that I never paid any attention to anything, and after the race was over, I just loaded up my car and went home, back to Santa Barbara at first. And after about the 3rd or 4th race, the fellow that paid the prize money said, I wish you'd come by after the race is over today, because I have quite a bit of money sitting there waiting for you. You're never here to collect the money when the race is over. And I said, I didn't even know I was getting paid for this.
Well, I remember that being there at night and being very cold and being all dressed up in a gorgeous white outfit or a summer outfit, while the boyfriend went around and around and mud splattered all over you. And I was just always annoyed, wondering when in the world we were going to get out of this place and go down to the Palomar and dance, because that's what I thought we ought to do.
Midget autos roared onto the quarter-mile oval in 1934 at the bottom of the Depression and provided enough spills and chills to stay alive until the post-war years when the Offenhauser cars really went big time. Los Angeles had several Chinatowns, but only one China City, and only from 1938 to 1948. It was supposed to be a sister street to Olvera Street, just catty-corner across the old plaza, and it was organized by the same civic-minded developer, Christine Sterling. She wanted to pay tribute to the Chinese who built the railroads in a lot of Los Angeles with an Oriental showplace. There was a Chinese temple with burning incense, a rickshaw with driver, long gowns, pigtails, coolie hats, paper lanterns, tinkling Chinese music, chopped suey, everything stereotypically Chinese except a laundry.
My dad, who was a very conservative man, was asked, and he did, wear a Chinese costume. I mean, my mother said that when she came over to America, that was the last Chinese dress she wanted to wear. Because she'd come to a new country, she felt she owed it to her host country to be like them. This is the early immigrant. For show purposes, everyone wore the little hat, you know, just to give as much atmosphere. And it was really the exoticism that attracted. It was a tourist attraction.
They had rickshaws. This was a great gimmick because they had these young Chinese boys just dressed like they do in China, and they had the rickshaws and their hats and all that, and they would go throughout that whole block.
It's all cobblestone. So you're rickety-ricked all over China City. You could have a picture taken for another 25 cents. And I remember an older lady who was very good at selling gardenias. She used to run around and say, "Gardenia nice." And she'd say it in such a fetching way that people would feel, oh, this little old lady should have, you know, we should buy something from her, kind of a thing.
After a number of fires, China City finally closed in 1948. And on this corner, China City is just a memory. For about 30 years, Howard Hughes was Los Angeles' #1 eccentric, and he had some tough competition. What will probably be his monument is a huge plywood boondoggle, the world's largest airplane with the ridiculous title of Spruce Goose. On November 2nd, 1947, in Long Beach Harbor, Hughes shoved the throttles full forward and got the flying lumberyard a few feet out of the water. Then the plane went back into its cocoon, and Hughes went back into his. After Hughes died in 1976, the Goose finally waddled out of hiding and squatted next to the Queen Mary, trying to be a tourist attraction. It never really got off the ground there either, and it was disassembled and shipped to an aviation museum in Oregon. But of all the things that aren't here anymore, Hughes' flying boat is probably the weirdest. I mean, for one thing, the Spruce Goose was made of birch.
You ought to be in pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.
The rest of the world thinks Hollywood is Los Angeles, but you and I know that isn't true. Hollywood is just another community here, the one that specializes in making movies and music and malarkey. All the stars had to come from somewhere, and many people think they came from right here.
My star, my star.
Schwab's was the kind of place where Frank Sinatra could come in and read Daily Variety and nobody would ask for an autograph.
This was a big
place, and it had anything and everything. But most of all, it was a meeting place.
Schwab's was a way of life. I mean, people came for breakfast and stayed all day.
Schwab's drugstore was known around the world as a place to be discovered, where everybody who wanted to be somebody had to be seen. Maybe the real reason Schwab's became so famous is that one man wrote it all down.
Sid Skolsky, was that the man's name? That was his office. He made that place his office. He wrote a big column, and everybody knew what was happening in the whole of L.A. from Sid Skolsky's column, which he wrote in Schwab's.
So he made it his base of operations, and he started writing about it. And then people would read about it, and when they came to California, they would rush to Schwab's.
My first trip out here, my dad took me to Schwab's, and I was so excited because I thought Lana Turner would still be right there on that stool. And I miss it. It wasn't anything special, but I'll tell you, thousands of girls in tight sweaters did sit there hoping to get discovered.
And in Hollywood, so many people wanted to be discovered that in 1956, Schwab's drugstore expanded eastward and added a coffee shop. But unfortunately, a sad day for many Angelenos came in 1983 when Schwab's drugstore closed their doors.
Harriet Nelson. She was so upset when it closed that when she would come in and drive by, she had to go down Sunset Boulevard, she couldn't look at it. She turned her face to the right. She got so upset. She said, you know, she always felt like Schwab's was Hollywood's corner.
A lot of myths and legends came out of Schwab's, but the real legends lived across the street in an exotic old hotel called the Garden of Allah. It was the former home of Alla Nazimova, one of the silent film sirens who became an instant antique when talkies came in. But she fought back, building a bunch of stucco cottages around her main mansion, and voila, a hotel. Now, if Schwab's was the hangout, the Garden of Allah was the hideaway for hanky-panky. So what happened? Why did it disappear? Well, the employed actors bought homes in Beverly Hills. They didn't need hangouts and hideaways anymore. Both Schwab's and the Garden of Allah were replaced by super shopping malls. So now the sun is going down, the stars are coming out, and it's time to have a ball. But do you realize how few people have ever been to a real ball? With ball gowns and corsages and tuxedos and patent leather? And it wasn't just Saturday night. Every night of the week, in ballrooms all over Los Angeles, young men could foxtrot together with their first love, step together step. They really were a way of life at night, but I'd hate to make a living trying to sell dance wax and corsages these days. What really isn't here anymore is that high-spending brother-in-law of the ballroom, the nightclub. A nightclub is really just a small, fancy ballroom with a restaurant to serve you food and a floor show to entertain you while you eat. And Los Angeles had the biggest, the best, the most famous, and the most expensive. And the nightclub that was all of that and more was the Coconut Grove at the Ambassador Hotel.
Now, as you entered the Coconut Grove, it really was a grove of coconuts, and not fake-looking coconut trees. They were really good-looking. Everything was done in magnificent taste. And then a big stairway down to the dance floor, boxes all along the side. Up on the top, there were more boxes. And then tables all around. The Coconut Grove was not a big barn. It was a gorgeous place. You came in, parked your car, then came through a series of beautiful shops. In fact, you could blindfold me, and I wouldn't know what town I was in, and you walk me through those shops, and I'd say, I'm in the Ambassador.
On the casino floor, which was directly across from the Coconut Grove, one of the places was occupied by the Blue Book models of Hollywood. Now, anybody who thought they had photographic qualities and things like that could enroll in this school. And if there's anything good about you in connection with entertainment, this lady was able to bring it out.
On every Sunday afternoon, an amateur photographer grabbed his movie camera and came back with more than just pretty pictures.
One girl was particularly very cooperative. She just wanted to do anything I said. Like I was a big-time director, here I was a nobody. And this was in 1942, and that girl was Norma Jean Doherty. A lot of people have claimed they discovered Marilyn Monroe. Well, in 1942, this is a frame enlargement of my movie, and that's her at 16.
But when the bathing beauties paraded off stage, the Coconut Grove would come alive with Freddie Martin, or Gus Arnheim, or Bing Crosby and the Rhythm Boys.
I sang in Glee Club in Hollywood High, and the three of us got together and imitated the Rhythm Boys at the Coconut Grove. And the Coconut Grove in those days was the #1 place in the world at which to sing, and of course, stars galore.
And it just so happened that the place in the world in which to sing was holding auditions.
So we went over and tried out with all the others, and my mother said, now don't be disappointed if you don't get the job, because I'd never made more than $5 from my dad for mowing the lawn and things like that. And I came back and she said, now I know how impressed you are and discouraged probably you are about now. I said, no, we got the job. We start next Monday and I'm going to make $100 a week. In those days, $100, wow. I'm telling you, the night we opened at the Coconut Grove, and we called ourselves the Three Ambassadors for the Ambassador Hotel, the night we opened, it held about 800. We had 1,600 kids from Hollywood High School that night. I could do no wrong.
Here is music by Martin.
People at the Coconut Grove didn't come to dance, they came to sway. You couldn't dance, there were too many people on the floor. This was a tremendously romantic time.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, here truly is music by Martin. Freddie Martin is singing saxophone and orchestra, broadcasting from fashionable Coconut Grove in the world-famous Ambassador Hotel, located on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, California.
When you would come to the Grove, they would dance by the bandstand if Phil was there and say, Phil, would you play Rose Room, which would happen to be his theme. That's our theme. They loved it, you know. I think the times dictated an awful lot of wonderful things. People were a little different. Well, I'm going to say they're far different than they are now.
I wish somebody would have tapped me on the shoulder and says, Leo, these are the good old days. And I would say, well, you're kidding, aren't you?
For decades, the Ambassador Hotel and the Coconut Grove were the signature way to live it up in Los Angeles. The music played on and on until January 2nd, 1989, when they finally closed their doors and the big band music stopped. Today, the Ambassador Hotel is still there, but it's an empty monument, reminding us of a glorious period of Los Angeles history. And we're back at the famous corner of Sunset and Vine, except you look around here today, you say, what's so famous? Over there used to be Glenn Wallach's Music City. That was the social center of Hollywood and the national center of the music business. And behind it was Tom Brenneman's restaurant, a tourist landmark, site of a Stone Age talk show called Breakfast in Hollywood. But it's what used to be right on this corner that made this corner famous. This was the Los Angeles headquarters of the National Broadcasting Company. Big complex of radio studios that looked like the Starship Enterprise. And all they produced was sound. As Ed Murrow used to say, I can hear it now.
That's me, Groucho Marx.
Oh, I know where my baton is. It's right here in the hall.
Oh, no, McGee, please, not on Sunday. Don't.
Gracie, what do we talk about?
Well, we can only talk about 5 minutes. That's all they want us to talk about.
Well, they tore it all down. The whole city block of NBC radio disappeared in 1964, and with it all of the magic. Almost. Actually, some of the machinery of that old magic factory is still here in the basement underneath Home Savings in the clubroom of the Pacific Pioneer Broadcasters. And you know, there are other treasure troves like this all over Los Angeles. People are saving little bits and pieces of the past for the future. Now, I know we've seen a lot of things that aren't here anymore, but if you've still got your imagination and your memory, they'll always be with us. Let's see if the thing still works. De casa été, muy buenas noches, para la ciudad de Los Angeles. Ralph Story here for KCET. Good evening, Los Angeles.
Well, those are amazing stories and pictures. Can you imagine?